Let's bring in KUSI aviation expert, former Navy combat pilot Brian Sunshine Sinclair. Commander Sinclair, you're following the mayor.
Tough act to follow.
Yeah. All right, so Wednesday, act of aggression,
yes, sir,
or just simply what goes on between air forces?
No, Paul, not an act of aggression at all. The way I see it is the purpose was twofold. The first, it's a great publicity exercise, we'll call it, for the Russian Air Force, both back in their home, but also abroad. So it demonstrated Russia and the Russian Air Force have capable and viable assets that can reach strategic ranges, and yet because of that, Russia is still a player in the world stage.
All right, we have some pictures of. Go ahead, throw it up of the stills. Describe what we're seeing and continue your thoughts, Sunshine.
Yeah, you bet. So, and the second purpose is going to be a kind of clever intelligence gathering. So, to break that down, we'll talk through the aircraft, and I apologize I can't see them in front of me, but we had two groups of aircraft. First group contained two strategic bombers, the Tu-95 Bear Fs, which if you look as propeller-driven aircraft, there are not a lot of strategic bombers these days that are propeller-driven. So, it's a venerable airframe. They were escorted by two what I would consider kind of the pinnacle of Russian aerospace aviation for the current conditions, and that's the Sukhoi 35 Flanker E. Very capable, very maneuverable, with a fantastic sensor suite package fighters. Those four aircraft we're going to call the bait aircraft. Now, still in the same group, but a little bit in trail, is going to be the A-50 mainstay. So ideally, your viewers will see a picture of that. The A-50 mainstay has a giant, a 30-foot in diameter radar dish on top. Its job is collecting intelligence. So it's going to look, and it's going to look pretty far, and it can watch the Americans launch and kind of study their tactics. But also, besides looking, I bet that it listens. And what I mean by that is it's going to collect signals coming off of those American aircraft so the Russians can better characterize the sensors on board, such as the radar.
All right, so let's throw up the map involved, if we could. This is that Alaskan identification zone that I was just talking about. Were they actually dangerously close to where our airspace is considered?
I would consider dangerous. So when it comes to sovereign North American airspace, it's coincident with territorial waters. So keep in mind, Paul, when we think of this airspace around here, it's protected by NORAD, North American Aerospace Defense Command. So that's an effort between Canada and the U.S. That's why I say North American airspace. So it's coincident with territorial waters, which is defined by international law as up to 12 nautical miles off the coast. Now you hear numbers like 8, 20, 32. So these two groups of aircraft the first group came 20 miles away, which 20 minus 12 is 8, so came 8 miles from U.S. airspace. But they were in, just as you mentioned, the Air Defense Identification Zone. So the 8 is a concept that was born back in World War II, actually, and it was emphasized, as you can imagine, after Pearl Harbor. And that is, there's going to be the zone where, and technically, looking at FAA regulations, it deals with civilian aircraft trying to get into our country or our nations. And but the military has used that concept or adopted that concept. But it can extend up to 200 nautical miles, and you can see the grid. And on that map there, you're going to see on the right would be Alaska, on the left will be Russia. And if you look at the little sliver of water between the two, that's the Bering Strait. At its most narrow point, it's only 51 nautical miles wide. So it's very close quarters up there. Now, the hash grid area is going to be your ATIS, and the ATIS is the point where we say, as the military, that we need to basically positively control the aircraft that are entering that area. So, A, we have to be able to identify it, and B, we have to know where it's going. If those are not the cases, then we'll launch fighters to intercept, visually ID, and escort said aircraft.
Brian, I want to get to some other things, but just quickly, how often does this happen? And we always hear about Russians coming to our space. I assume we're doing the same thing to them, correct?
Yes, we are. So since 2007, the Russians have had long-range patrols, and some reports state that it's been anywhere from 7 to 10 times a year. So it is by no means a novel concept here. And there is reciprocity, meaning that we do it too, right? I mean, if they're going to do it, why don't we push back, right?
All right. Hey, I know you're a Navy guy, but that F-22 is a pretty darn good plane, isn't it?
That it is, man. I am very jealous. Excuse me. I had a chance to dogfight. I was in the F-18, obviously, versus an F-22. And very maneuverable. As you probably have heard, it's a fifth-generation fighter, meaning it's cutting edge. It was actually debuted back in 2005 with the Air Force. And, Paul, it has something called vectored thrust. Are you familiar with that?
No, what is that?
Okay, so the tailpipes move, and that can actually...
Shorten the takeoff you need?
Yeah,
Right?
it helps with takeoff, absolutely, but it also helps with slow speed maneuverability and just maneuverability in general. So dogfighting is about pulling your nose onto the bad guy, your opponent, as quickly as possible. And when your tails can turn to help move your nose, it's pretty impressive.
Hey, so you've had to do this before, right? Escort planes out of a zone?
I have, yeah, both during Operation Enduring Freedom, which would be efforts focused in Afghanistan. I was in the Indian Ocean, and I got a call vectored onto an Indian aircraft that's a variant of this Tu-95 called the Tu-142.
So is it as casual as Maverick? I mean, did you get inverted?
No, and I kept both hands on the controls, Paul. I'll say that. So, but no, it's not. But I'll tell you what, the stress came is I didn't want to mess it up. So I'm joining up on this huge plane, and I got it, and I'm by myself, single seat. I've got a wingman, but I have to get close enough to take a nice picture, but not too close that we rub aircraft and cause some kind of international incident. So we joined up. I was actually able to talk to the other pilot on a radio. We have a certain frequency, and he noticed that I was taking pictures. So he said, "Hey, did you get some good pictures?" I said, "Well, yes, I did." He goes, "Well, hey, can you send those to me?" And he gave me a Yahoo email address. I kid you not. So I said, "Well, I'll try my best." I peeled off. I headed home. The commanders allowed me to do it. I sent the pictures. Never heard back.
Sunshine, I appreciate you making time in your day for us. We'll rest a little easier knowing that pilots like yourself are defending our coastlines.
Yes, sir. It was a pleasure. Thank you very much, Paul.
We'll